Hey guys, welcome back to Elevate. This is Kaushik. I am very excited to bring you guys today's discussion. It is one of the most value-packed ones yet. I'm talking with Nandini, who heads up Uber's business development in South Asia and India, which is one of Uber's largest growth markets with over 1 billion people. She's also a director at Uber, which is a pretty big deal. She joined Uber directly from JP Morgan Investment Banking, where she worked in their TMT group and led many high-profile transactions in TMT. She's out an accelerated career in a very short period of time, and so I think you guys will learn a lot from this entire conversation. Some of the topics we talk about, one, serving as an executive at a high-growth company like Uber, and then also heading up the business development for one of its largest markets. Then we talk about how her experience in JP Morgan and TMT helped her. And then we talk about why she thinks finance or consulting is the best place, in her opinion, to start laying the foundation for a career. But she says, try not to stay too long. She talks about why she chose JP Morgan as well as TMT to help launchpad her career. And then we switch over to her experiences at Uber, where she joined pre-IPO. So she helped the company go public, and then now heads business development, right? And then in a growth market where they're achieving 50x growth in a 4-year period. And why young people really fail when making perhaps a transition from, a finance career to a startup career. And then finally, we touch on, technology as being obviously integral in everything that we do. So, what that means for, a lot of the audience, which is, business or finance students, as it relates to technology in business careers, as well as entering technology careers. So I think you guys will really enjoy the discussion. For all the new participants and listeners, welcome to Elevate. Really excited to have you guys on board. If you want more information, obviously look in the bio, tell a friend, rate, subscribe, review, etc., and just spread the word. I hope you like the discussion and have a great week. I'm super excited to have Nandini here today. I'll start off with having her give a quick, intro about her career.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Kaushik and just speaking to you. I worked in management consulting for 3 years. I absolutely loved that environment. It was very fast paced. You were learning in different teams. You were getting comfortable with different teams every time, as well as different client situations. I loved all the business aspect of it. And this led me to another discovery over the 3 years, which is I loved doing consulting engagements for tech, media, telecom clients. The industry is evolving very fast, and I felt that over the longer term, I would love to kind of work in the TMT space. So after management consulting, when I decided to go to business school, as you know, business school is another place of discovery. So I did go to University of Chicago. There I actually explored a bunch of options in tech, media, telecom. I explored Silicon Valley options as well as what else could I do. And again, for me, I feel that the first 5-10 years of your career are building blocks where you should be willing to really work hard, really have as fast a learning curve as possible, because those building blocks really help you differentiate from everybody else around the world. So while you all are probably going to the top universities, so you already have the first filter of a high pedigree, but then you have to do the second level of differentiation of your experiences, which are driven by the choices you make in your career. So when I was in business school, at that time, technology was coming back, but it wasn't as hot as it is today. So I explored options of doing a technology role directly from business school. And I felt if I joined companies like Google, Facebook, those roles were great, but again, didn't feel like I would learn as fast as I had liked. So therefore, I decided to explore investment banking, but I was very clear that I'm going to only work in a TMT group in any of the banks I get. So for me, a combination of the industry and finance was very important. With that focus, when I explored all the top banks, I also wanted to make sure that I go to a place where I work with the top technology companies, because that will be my best vantage point to eventually move to a technology company. So thereafter I did my summer at JP Morgan in TMT Group. which I really liked. I felt like I could leverage my management consulting experience. It was a lot of hard work, guys, but it felt like I was learning very fast, which was my primary motive in the sector I really cared about. So I decided to join full time. I can speak later about my investment banking and finance experience, which was really amazing. I spent 3.5 years in TMT, JP Morgan, where I worked on a host of large M&A transactions as well as IPOs. Again, gave me a great flavor of TMT because TMT again is a very broad sector, right? Within technology, media, telecom, there are different types of things that are happening, and you have to find your own interest areas. Uh, After that, I realized that for me to continue to learn and grow fast, technology is the area that I wanted to focus on, and I decided to explore options. As when I decided to continue evaluate technology companies, I again had a few criterias around. I really wanted to go to a place where I believed in the mission. I had a role that was not too specific because when you get siloed down so quickly when you're entering technology company, it gets really hard to figure out and navigate the organization. So strong mission, fast growth, and a broader role was my criteria of actually evaluating the technology roles. As I evaluated, I got the opportunity to build and be a part of Uber India in 2015. It's been 4 years now, and it's been a tremendous learning experience, as well as just being part of actually building a region that is of strategic importance to Uber globally, seeing growth of 50x in 4 years in terms of what the business was and what this is today. Um, what I currently do is I head business development, which basically means how do we continue to unlock growth for Uber platform in India and South Asia. I specifically say platform because we started with rides, now we've added Eats, and we're going to add other new businesses. And within rides as well, it's not just cars. Like we have auto and we have moto and we have many other new modes of transport that are being innovated here on the ground. So my role primarily involves working with external partners. It could be a range of buy versus build versus partner decision to how to have a go-to-market strategy, how to actually build commercial partnerships with external players for Uber to continue to grow and scale in our geography. So that's it. I'll pause and maybe let Kaushik ask next level of questions.
Good background. I think a couple takeaways for me, at least from what Nandini had said, right? She kind of mentioned early on in your career, treating those as building blocks of, building experiences, working really, really hard and learning a lot. And three, really finding out what it is that you're passionate about and drives you, right? Yeah. So realistically, is getting as much learning and experience as you can early, and then start developing that sense of what am I really passionate about, and then going and seeking it out. I would love for Nandini, if you could spend a little bit of time on your current role at or Uber, but also how it's evolved. Taking the company through that growth phase. Like, what are your day-to-day responsibilities like? And then, especially, and then focusing a little bit coming from a more recent finance background, right? How do you leverage that background to get the most out of your job?
Yeah. So I'll just answer it in three ways. One, what I have done at Uber, and what I do, and where the finance brings in. So number one, Uber is a very fast-paced company, which means your roles and responsibilities also keep changing. So it is any fast growth company role pretty much requires a strong learning mindset and a lot of resilience. Because what in my 4 years at Uber, my first 1.5 years were all about get stuff done ASAP, because we are growing like nobody's business. We have no time to do a lot of analysis. Just have hypothesis, go fast. Even if we fail, it's fine, we'll figure it out. Then we went through this cultural transformation, which made the kind of strategy and how we went about doing things very different, which means we really had to step back and adapt to a very different environment of moving from a startup to a corporate. And I'll be transparent here, it is a very hard shift, because either you adapt or you just don't. And this is where I want to give advice to a lot of young folks, especially because I've seen a lot of young folks join Uber who got very fortunate as their first jobs. And they felt like, and a lot of them who did not stay on or did not succeed was because they were too happy and too comfortable and too excited by the first phase they saw. They felt like this unlimited capital and growth is the most fun way to go in life. We just want to keep doing this and leave Uber and do it in other companies. It's great, but guys, you're building your career for 30 years. You need to know how to grow fast, but how to go slow, how to restructure. If you want to be CEOs and really senior executives, you need to build different types of experiences and kind of use different types of your brain and strategies and personality to lead with. And that's what I really want to highlight for the people who are here just listening in. So the second phase was about adapting to really becoming a matrix organization, corporate, having a lot of processes and systems. And thereafter, last year we've spent really doing a lot of work around how to prepare ourselves to be a public company. Like, what are we going to go talk about? I mean, we're losing money, we have rights, we want to build a platform. What does that even mean? How are we going to do things differently that make us that continue to have the growth trajectory, that show some part to profitability, but also partner with cities, really show our make an effort to work with the drivers. So that has actually led us to do a lot of work on how we actually build rides and eats business together. How do we build transit? How do we actually work on things like electric vehicles? So a lot of those themes actually came about as preparation to IPO. And now we are very, very focused. In fact, today I had a long day session around what are we going to do in 2020, which is all about efficiency, efficiency, and efficiency. I think we all know Uber is here to stay. It's grown really fast, but now it's time to become as efficient and really get profitable quickly. So again, going back, it's been a different role every year. That's what has kept me here so far. And I feel in terms of my day-to-day work, I split my work into 3 phases. The 30% of my work is continuing to lead the external discussions, which is working with the largest OEMs, working with the largest airports, the largest Amazons and Googles of the world, largest technology companies, where we already have an existing partnership, or we're going to grow and strike a new partnership. So that's 30% of my work. So external discussions. Another 30% of my work is pretty much we can discuss great ideas externally, but that means nothing unless you have a plan to champion those ideas internally and actually drive the discussion, drive the decision, as well as setting up the teams for success. So 30% of my time is actually on the execution phase, as well as internally championing the ideas. And the rest 30% of my time is spent on team, which I think is extremely important, because as you grow, you just cannot do everything yourself. You need to set yourself a very strong team that you're spending time with, making sure they're inspired, motivated, and aligned. One of the challenges I've seen in the fast growth companies is once you get this leeway that you have a big company, so you can do a lot of things, but you also have to make sure you're working on the right set of priorities, and I call that brutal prioritization. The fun thing about Uber is you can do a lot. You can do a lot on the drivers, on the riders, on the cities, on being efficient, on growing fast. You can do so much that unless you really focus and narrow down with the right framework on what is the most impactful thing you should be doing, is very, very important. So I would say that's how I split my time across the 3 things. And finally, coming from finance, I personally think that finance is an extremely strong way to start your career. It sets you up very well on 3 fronts. One, it gives you a very, very strong analytical foundation that brings a lot of trust and credibility on any other career that you go for later. Even though I don't do financial modeling on a daily basis, I understand how it works. I can give guidance to someone on my team on how to go about it. And in general, you just earn a lot of credibility, which becomes very important as you go senior in organizations, that people want to trust you to actually, when you say I'm championing this idea, they want to trust you, and they trust you if you have done certain kind of work over your first 10, 12 years of your career. So that's one, in terms of your analytical foundation and trust. Second is you become very good at understanding the external dynamics. What's happening in the market? If you're talking to a Suzuki, you understand what's happening in their financials. You understand what should be the right pitch to them. Why should they work with Uber at this time? And because at the end of the day, you can't just go and ask, this is what I want from you. You have to make it meaningful to them. and you make it meaningful, if you understand how companies work and how executives think and what matters to them on their stock price, on their positioning, on their earnings calls. So I feel like that becomes that is a pretty strong skill to develop from finance. And third thing is, while finance is all about numbers and deals, the one thing that I feel I learned a lot and I have leveraged a lot at Uber is how to do large scale things. So once if you've learned how to do a large deal at a large bank, you know how to bring 5 different stakeholders together. A deal is not just done as an M&A deal. It requires equity stakeholders, debt stakeholders, compliance, legal, and whatnot. So once you've figured out how to do large scale things, keep people focused and kind of fit the jigsaw puzzle and keep everyone engaged towards its final outcome is the skill I feel like I use the most actually at Uber.
Finance side, 100% agree. I think it's the combination of the analytical rigor and the types of transactions you work on that builds the base of how you think about problem solving when you're early in your career. And then it's kind of working with oftentimes challenging groups of people, whether it's client, external, or internal, and bringing them together. At the end of the day, I think a lot of folks in the audience here, right, are going to start in finance or consulting, but in 3 to 5 years time, going to move on to do many other things outside of finance and consulting. So I think it's really important to kind of keep all, both those things in mind, along with then the understanding of how all this fits into the macro dynamics as you deal with people. And then back to kind of the current rule of Uber, I think it's just fascinating, Nandini, the growth. I mean, the growth the company's had, more broadly globally, but specifically in the market that you're in. You said 50x, over a period of time. So starting from a phase of, as unlimited capital growing to kind of more structure, then going to the IPO, and then finally now operating as a public company. I think that's like, often a career's worth of experience in 4 short years. That's actually amazing as well. So, or what do you see that are, important skill sets to build, but also things that you see that make people successful at an Uber? Like, is it, people that may have worked in, a couple of years outside and coming into Uber, or maybe are looking to come straight into Uber? Like, what are the things that make them successful during the early part of their career? And what are the things you mentioned a little bit of people don't do as well that you'd like to see them do better?
Yeah. So there's always a trade-off, right? And I see that often at Uber as well. There are people whose first job is Uber, and there are people who have worked in other places, be it consulting or banking, and who come to Uber. I would say it probably doesn't apply to all technology companies, but at Uber, I think people who come from outside actually succeed more at Uber. And the reason I say that is when you go to fast-growing companies, nobody has time to teach you. You are either you're kind of going with the gut, or you are just expected to fix things very quickly. So it's a great on-the-job training environment. But if you've had a good foundation in consulting and banking, you are much higher. You're gonna have likelihood of success has been much higher at Uber in general, because they just expect you to make a lot of decisions, and your prior experience comes very handy in that. So that's number one. Number two, around people I hire on my team, as well as I see across the younger crowd who does well. Number one thing, and I'm again saying it probably for the 10th time already, which is having a very strong learning mindset. Learning 2 things. One, obviously what you're expected in terms of your job, but secondly, even beyond your job. So when people who continue to evolve and succeed are the people who obviously do their job really well, but really take the extra effort to do a lot more, especially in the first 5, 7, 8 years of your career. That's the only way to shine, guys. You're all coming from the top schools. You're all really smart. Then the differentiation becomes who has a much better work ethic, who's willing to think out of the box, who's willing to learn and go an extra mile, and finally, just be nice. I think that's another overrated skill. A lot of people who have done really well in their undergrad are likely to do well. There is no question about it. But then how you do well, how you build your network, how you find your allies is extremely important. So I pretty much see the gaps where very smart people fail is they don't find enough people who really like them, or and because of that, they don't get their work done. They just kind of try to do everything themselves. That will not work. You have to get very comfortable with sharing credit, which again is a very important skill, and it just comes with time. So again, like in terms of if you are just early on in your career, keep learning, always think about what more you can do than what is expected of you, and make a good set of allies and network within the company. It will help you learn more. It'll help you find new roles within the company, and it'll help you find champions for you just over time.
Yes. Well, let's say two things. One, we understand and know now that technology, and we've known this for a few years and maybe a decade now, that technology is basically disrupting every industry. So in the future state, right, maybe 40, 50, 60, upwards of that percent of all jobs will be, somewhat technology, for whether they're technology companies or, technology functions within companies, etc. So, as you're kind of talking to students who, a lot of them may have, an economics or business or whatever type of background, what are like specific, two-part question. So what are specific skills they can build even at undergrad or grad school or whatever to get that technology mindset, right? And then number two, probably like what types of roles, even within an Uber, that, I mean, I'm sure engineering is a huge function, but what are the types of roles for a company, not even just Uber, just generally in technology, that someone from, finance, economics, with a little bit of a technical background, like how should they position themselves if they want to work at a technology company like Uber?
Yes, so I'll split out within a technology company. There are different types of companies. Either you have absolutely product-led companies like Facebook and Google, etc. Right? They're pretty much in the cloud. So there are two types of roles. Either you go into engineering and product, or secondly you go into strategy, business operations, and sales. Those are the kind of roles, because the tech is pretty much built by the product team, and then the business model is driven by pretty much advertising, sales, and adding new kinds of products, etc. In case of a lot of the gig economy that pretty much Uber kind of started, which is Uber, food delivery, and now everything else that's coming onto it, there the roles actually become even more interesting, because there are three components to the business. One is product engineering, so you have an app. Second is literally operations, because it is online and offline both. And third part again stays, which is strategy, finance, business development, and all of that. I think people who are just coming out of college can take any of these roles, to be honest. They will learn a lot from any vantage point. Really depends a little bit on their personality, and that should be a part of their research in terms of how they should pitch themselves. Operations roles are very on-ground roles, which is building cities. I mean, it's not really literally finding a human driver every day, but it is about how do you build those processes at scale? How do you think about a mini marketplace like Delhi? How would you think about what should be my driver profile? What should be my rider profile? So pretty much running a business at a very micro level. So those give you very strong operational skills. The other sets of roles are around strategy, business development, etc., which are more larger roles. So my role is not about Delhi today. My role is about all of India. How can I do things that can help the 50 cities we are present in? So it's slightly less on ground, but pretty much what I do gets executed by the operational teams, right? So you still stay in a lot of touch with them. So depending on the kind of internships or courses or things you've done should kind of give you a sense. But I honestly think if you're early on in your career, either of those roles are really good entry points for someone to get a flavor of what it means to work in a fast food technology company.
Got it. Couple just kind of very fast, quick-based questions. So as you think about finance consulting versus working at a tech startup, obviously it's about a trade-off. Do you have an advice for one or the other, or just kind of take the best job you can get that lines up with your own interests and passions?
Number one, take the best job you can get. Number two, if you really have to make a choice between a tech startup or a finance consulting, it's not really an either or. I strongly recommend a finance or a consulting foundation. Your likelihood of success longer term will really help. You can join tech startups after doing 2 or 3 years of finance or consulting and keep doing one startup after the other.
Yeah, another quick question for you. Have you noticed, like, people from finance consulting, one thing at least I've noticed when I talk to students and people that I've worked with, just the finance consulting is great in that it's structured and it's client facing, get a lot of experience, but maybe one of the things that they don't adapt as quickly to is the fact that in a tech company, it's actually you take out some of the structure. You mentioned this early on, and you operate kind of in this land. So while in banking or consulting or private equity, you're used to putting these memos together and spending a lot of time. Here, you're like, okay, let's just have a document. Let's get through it. Let's get to the point that you're talking about. How do you make that mindset switch in your mind where there's less on form and maybe more on substance? I guess was one way to put it.
The answer to that question is don't stay in investment banking or consulting too long. If you stay too long, it's very hard to switch. Get the foundation in 2 to 4 years and then come to a tech startup. That will be my recommendation.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I've got 2 more questions from my end. One is, can you talk a little bit about working at a high growth market? A lot of the students, obviously, and some of our students are certainly international, so they know. But what is some? I mean, I've always felt, and I've been fortunate to get this at Goldman and other places, to get kind of a global experience. Obviously, it's fine if you don't, etc. But maybe talk about some of the positives and also some of the challenges of working at a high growth market like South Asia, which the great thing is it's growing at 50x. But maybe talk about both sides of that.
Yes. So overall, my recommendation for young folks is get global experience early on in your career. It'll teach you a lot. It'll make you a very differentiated career profile than anyone else. The world is getting very global. Even today, like I worked in the US I was in the US for 6 years. I've been in India for 4 years. I might just go back to US or any other geography again. The world has become so global that for your next 20, 30 years of career, you need to be very comfortable working in different geographies, for which you need to, again, get that experience within the first 5 to 8 years of your career. That's my one strong recommendation. Number 2 is around pros and cons of global. There is a lot of fun in working in global headquarters. You have a lot of power, you have a lot of influence, and you have a much broader vantage point. But there's a lot of fun in working in local markets because you're so much closer to the action. You're so much closer to what is happening on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I would say, it's just 2 different sets of experiences on a day-to-day basis. I do miss the power and influence you have in the headquarters, but sometimes it's just easier to actually do things on your own here in India, far away from San Francisco and Silicon Valley. But working in a global company in an emerging market, I think, is a great combination, because you do stay connected with what's happening in Silicon Valley and really get the best of products and resources and capital, and you're very close to the ground and really influencing, literally moving millions of riders a day, and hundreds and thousands of driver partners are earning livelihood on your platform.
Yeah, so okay, that's awesome. I think you're absolutely right on. I think I do look, as we think ahead, right? You see where the population trends are. You see where the growth really is. At Goldman and other places that I've been, I think our strategic focus is on this global growth. And even on the technology side, yeah, I'd say 70 to 80% or even more of the users of like an Instagram, Uber now, etc., are going to be just raw users, are going to be from outside the US, right? So just as you think about as how the economics and how the finances are even shifting and user behavior, et cetera, it's much more global. And I think in order to understand how to operate with those types of customers and clients, you need to really, it's helpful to have that sense of global knowledge. Yes, you can get that here, but I think it's super helpful. One thing I'll say, Nandini's, very, very modest. She's one of the strongest people that we had in our business school class, had an amazingly, decorated career at JP Morgan, and now at Uber is kind of doing amazing things on an almost like, daily, weekly basis, building each of these micro markets. And as you guys can understand how hard it is to take, go to each of these markets and from the ground up build them, and she's in charge of all that. So it's been amazing. So I'll caveat all that and ask you, Nandini, a question. What are some, 1 or 2 mistakes you've made as you've thought about your career, and maybe like, what can others learn from them? What did you learn from them? Whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Got it. I would say the most important mistake I've made is actually when I moved from, so consulting and finance are very similar, right? In terms of structure, you're in small teams, you work with really smart people, and you just focus on doing the right thing, and you feel like you're doing the right thing. My biggest mistake that I made at Uber is, as part of my transition, I found it really hard that sometimes people just didn't get what I was saying, and actually grew impatient a lot of the times. I felt like, why are they not getting it? And that's when I realized it is not as linear as it used to be in consulting and banking. In consulting or banking, client has given you a problem, you're going in solving it, and all five people are moving in the same direction for the entire time, and you're going to bring some revenue to your firm that's attributed to that. But when you go into a company, it is really about shared credit. And to get shared credit, you really need to make sure that three or four other people also feel like they have also originated that idea, they're also part, they have a say. And that's when I felt like I wasn't trying hard enough to kind of bring everybody on board and actually inspire them early on. I was more like telling them that, okay, this needs to get done, just guys do it. So I would say that that has been my one significant mistake, which took me a while to correct, because I was, again, too trained in consulting and banking for too long. So guys, so if you move on early, you'll not have these challenges. If you move a little late, you'll take a while to adapt. But I would say that is pretty much the most important thing I advise anybody who comes in my team, pretty much from consulting and banking, and I tell them, don't assume anything. You're here to inspire, you're here to educate, and you're here to share your credit. You're not here to tell people what to do.
Got it. Awesome. And then I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been incredibly, I think, insightful for me, and also I think the people that are going to be listening to it. So, and as always, I really thank Nandini for her time, an immense experience, both in consulting, obviously, but finance, and now at a high growth technology firm like Uber, in building out one of its top markets in the world. So it's an amazing role, amazing responsibility. I think really great advice for folks here as they're thinking about their careers, whether they're in college or post, etc. So obviously, thank you so much, Nandini. I think as always, really appreciate it. And yeah, so stay tuned for future for the next podcast, obviously here and the session that we'll have. But for now, thanks again, and yeah, talk to you guys soon. Thank you, Nandini.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.